Commander Nathan Drake stood at rigid attention in Admiral Harrison's office aboard the UGF Resolute Dawn, his expression carefully neutral despite the bizarre assignment he'd just received. A princess? He couldn't quite keep the disbelief from his voice. Sir, with respect, I'm a tactical specialist, not a bodyguard. Admiral Harrison's weathered face remained impassive as he studied the holographic display between them. The rotating image showed a striking feminine figure with flowing silver hair and skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Princess Ariel Vera of the Luminalis Empire isn't just any royal commander. She's the keystone of our latest peace negotiations. If anything happens to her while she's aboard the ship, the Admiral let the implications hang heavy in the recycled air. Drake's jaw tightened. I understand the diplomatic significance, sir, but surely there are more qualified. You were specifically requested. Harrison's dark eyes fixed on him. Your combat record against the Drachnid insurgency impressed certain parties. The princess's safety is now your primary mission until we reach Luminalis space. Dismissed. Drake saluted crisply and strode from the office, his boots echoing against the metal deck plates. The assignment felt wrong. He was a soldier, not some glorified babysitter for an alien princess who probably thought humans were barely better than animals. The diplomatic quarters entrance loomed ahead, its polished surfaces a stark contrast to the utilitarian military corridors. Two Luminalis guards flanked the doors, their ceremonial armor gleaming. They regarded Drake with barely concealed disdain as he approached. Commander Drake, here to meet Princess Vera, he stated, showing his credentials. The taller guard's lip curled slightly. The princess is preparing herself. You will wait. Drake planted his feet and crossed his arms. Fine. If they wanted to play status games, he could wait all day. His patience was rewarded 15 minutes later when the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Princess Ariel Vera emerged like a star going supernova. Her silver hair cascaded past her shoulders in intricate braids, and her skin pulsed with subtle patterns of light that seemed to dance beneath the surface. Her ceremonial robes, all flowing silver and white, made her look more like a spirit than a flesh and blood being. She was also scowling directly at him. So this is my new handler? Her voice was musical but sharp with contempt. How quaint. Tell me, Commander, do you actually know how to use that primitive weapon you're carrying? Or is it merely decorative? Drake's hand hadn't been anywhere near his sidearm. The fact that she'd noticed it at all spoke volumes about her own tactical awareness. I'm proficient enough, Your Highness. He kept his tone professionally neutral. Though I hope we won't need to test that during your stay. Indeed, she glided past him, her guards falling in behind her. Well, come along then. I suppose you'll need to learn my schedule if you're to be my shadow for this tedious journey. Drake fell into step beside her, noting how she subtly shifted away to maintain distance. Your safety is my primary concern, Your Highness. I'll try to be as unobtrusive as possible while ensuring it. How thoughtful. Her skin flickered with what he assumed was amusement. Tell me, Commander, do all humans practice stating the obvious, or is it a special talent of yours? Before Drake could respond, the ship's emergency klaxons blared to life. The deck beneath them shuddered violently, throwing the princess off balance. Drake's combat instincts took over. He caught her before she could fall, one arm around her waist, while his other hand already had his weapon drawn. Her skin flashed brilliant white at the contact. Unhand me this instant, she hissed, but another explosion rocked the ship before she could pull away. We're under attack, Drake said, scanning for threats as emergency lighting bathed the corridor in red. Your Highness, we need to move. Now. The princess's guards had already drawn their energy weapons, taking defensive positions, but Drake's attention was on the maintenance access panel that had just opened behind them, revealing a dark figure with something metallic in their hands. Down! Drake shouted, tackling Aruil as a blast of energy seared through the space where she'd been standing. He rolled them behind a support column, keeping his body between her and the attacker. How dare you, she began, but her words cut off as return fire from her guards filled the corridor with actinic light. The assassin retreated back into the access tunnel, leaving behind only scorched bulkheads and the lingering scent of ozone. Drake helped Ariel to her feet, noting how her skin had shifted to a pale, agitated purple. Your quarters aren't secure, he said. We need a defensible position until we can identify the extent of this breach. And I suppose you have somewhere in mind? She straightened her robes with sharp, angry movements. My quarters, single entrance, reinforced walls, and I know every centimeter of the space. He met her incredulous stare. Unless you'd prefer to take your chances with more assassins? Ariel's skin pulsed with indignation. Your quarters? I suppose next you'll suggest we share your bed as well? Actually, Drake began, but another explosion cut him off. The deck plates buckled beneath him. Fine, she snapped, her hair whipping around her face as she spun toward him. Lead the way, Commander, but if you try anything inappropriate, I'll have you ejected into space. Drake fought back a smirk as he guided them through the emergency corridors, his weapon ready. I assure you, Your Highness, my intentions are purely professional. They better be she muttered, then stumbled as another blast rocked the ship. Her hand brushed his arm for balance and her skin flickered with embarrassment. They reached his quarters in record time. Drake performed a quick sweep before ushering her inside. The space was small but meticulously organized, a soldier's quarters through and through. His narrow bed was made with military precision, and a few personal items sat on the desk. A worn copy of The Art of War, a holographic chess set, and a metal case. Ariel took one look at the single bed and arched a silvery eyebrow. Well, Commander, where exactly do you propose to sleep? I'll take the floor, of course. Drake began checking the room's security systems. I've slept in worse conditions. How noble. Her tone dripped sarcasm, but he caught her studying his profile with something that might have been interest. Do all humans make such dramatic sacrifices, or are you trying to impress me? Drake finished his security check before turning to face her. Neither, Your Highness. It's simply the proper thing to do. Proper? She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. A human lecturing me about propriety? How delightfully absurd. Would you prefer I take the bed and leave you to the floor? He couldn't resist the jab. Her skin rippled with patterns he couldn't quite interpret. You know, Commander, you're rather bold for a primitive species. And you're rather quick to judge for someone who's never spent time with humans before. She moved closer, her bioluminescence creating shifting shadows across his face. Perhaps I'm judging you perfectly well. You humans are all the same, driven by base instincts and... The ship's communication system crackled to life with Admiral Harrison's voice. All hands, security breach in sectors 7 through 12. Multiple hostile targets identified. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Drake moved to the door, checking the corridor through the security feed. Looks like we'll have to continue this fascinating cultural discussion later, Your Highness. Don't think I didn't notice you changing the subject, she said, but her attention was focused on the security feeds as well. Those attack patterns, they're familiar. Familiar how? She hesitated, then moved beside him to study the feed more closely. Her shoulder nearly touched his, and he caught a faint scent like starlight and ozone. These aren't random terrorists, Commander. Someone very specific wants me dead. Drake turned to look at her, struck by how the emergency lighting made her skin shimmer like aurora. Care to share who that might be? Not particularly. She met his gaze, her alien eyes holding a challenge. Unless you earn my trust first. And how exactly does one earn the trust of a luminalis princess? A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Survive the night without getting me killed. That would be an excellent start. Their banter was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. Drake moved instinctively to shield Ariel, but she was already reaching for something concealed in her robes. Your Highness, he whispered, please tell me you're not carrying a weapon. Of course I am. She produced a sleek energy pistol. What kind of princess do you think I am? Drake stared at the weapon in her hands, momentarily caught off guard. The kind who's full of surprises, apparently. Oh, Commander. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. You have no idea. The footsteps grew closer. Drake positioned himself near the door, signaling Ariel to take cover behind his desk. To his surprise, she moved with practiced grace, taking up a tactical position that suggested this wasn't her first firefight. "I thought Luminalis royalty considered combat beneath them," he whispered. She gave him a look that could have melted steel. "We consider many things beneath us, Commander. Survival isn't one of them." The door's security panel beeped. Someone was trying to override the lock. Drake readied his weapon, noting how Ariel's grip on her pistol mirrored his own stance. Maybe humans weren't the only ones with base instincts after all. "Your form needs work," she murmured, eyes fixed on the door. "My form is perfect. Your left elbow is too high." "This isn't a dance lesson, Your Highness." "No?" Her skin pulsed with what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. "And here I thought we were getting along so well." The door's lock sparked, and Drake tensed. "Stay behind me." "I think not." She moved to flank the entrance. "I refuse to cower while a human plays hero." "This isn't about playing hero." "No?" Her voice dropped lower. "Then why are you so determined to protect me, Commander?" "Pure duty?" Before Drake could answer, the door slid open. Two figures in stealth suits burst through, weapons raised. Drake and Aruiel moved in perfect synchronization. His shot took down the first intruder, while hers dropped the second. In the aftermath, they found themselves standing close, adrenaline coursing through their bodies. Aruiel's skin was glowing brighter than ever, patterns swirling across her surface like cosmic storms. "Not bad," Drake admitted, "for royalty." "Not bad yourself." She holstered her weapon with a flourish. "For a primitive." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Drake found himself noticing how her bioluminescence created patterns that seemed to dance across her high cheekbones, how her silver hair caught the emergency lighting like strands of starlight. Ariel cleared her throat and stepped back, though her skin betrayed her with a flash of what might have been embarrassment. "We should secure these intruders and check their identifications." "Already on it." Drake moved to examine the fallen attackers, trying to ignore how the room felt colder with the distance between them. "Though I have to ask, where exactly were you hiding that weapon in those robes?" She made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Wouldn't you like to know, Commander?" "Professional curiosity only, Your Highness." "Of course." She knelt beside him to examine the intruders, her robes brushing against his arm. "And I'm sure your elevated heart rate is purely professional as well?" Drake looked up sharply, but her expression was innocently focused on the task at hand. Only the subtle flickering of her skin gave away her amusement. "You can read human vital signs?" "Among other things." She glanced at him sideways. "Your species is remarkably transparent." As they secured the unconscious attackers, the ship's emergency systems continued to wail. Drake activated his comm unit. "Command, this is Commander Drake. We have 2 hostiles subdued in my quarters. The princess is secure." Static crackled before Admiral Harrison's voice came through. "Good work, Commander. Keep her there. We have reports of more intruders. Engineering teams are working to restore full power." "Understood, sir." Drake turned to find Ariel examining the attacker's equipment with professional interest. "These aren't standard weapons," she said, holding up one of the rifles. "The design is interesting." "Careful with that." Drake moved to take it from her, but she pulled it away. "I've been handling advanced weaponry since before you were born, Commander." "Really?" "Because you don't look a day over 300. Her skin rippled with unexpected mirth. "Was that an attempt at humor? How charming. Though for future reference, commenting on a Luminalis woman's age is considered quite forward." Drake felt his ears warm. "I'll keep that in mind." "See that you do." She set the weapon down and stretched, her movements deliberately graceful. "Now about these sleeping arrangements. I already told you, I'll take the floor." "Don't be absurd." She gestured to the narrow bed. "We're both adults. Surely we can share a sleeping space without scandal?" Drake stared at her. "I thought physical proximity to humans was beneath your people." "Many things are beneath us, Commander." She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But sometimes we make exceptions." The air between them crackled with tension. Drake found himself studying the intricate patterns of light beneath her skin, the way they seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breathing. A distant explosion shattered the moment. The deck lurched, sending them both stumbling. Drake caught her instinctively, one arm around her waist. This time, she didn't immediately pull away. Your Highness, Eruiel, she corrected softly. If we're going to be sharing quarters, you might as well use my name. Eruiel. The name felt strange on his tongue. Beautiful, but strange. I'm Nathan. Her skin brightened at the sound of her name. Nathan. She tested it carefully. How unexpectedly pleasant. Another explosion rocked the ship. This one closer. We should prepare for more company, Drake said, reluctantly releasing her. Yes, she agreed, though she seemed in no hurry to move away. Though I must say, Commander Nathan Drake, this evening has been far more entertaining than I anticipated. Being shot at counts as entertainment for you? No. Her lips curved in a smile that made his pulse quicken. But watching you try so hard to maintain your professional distance certainly does. Before Drake could respond, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The only illumination came from Ariel's softly glowing skin. Well, she said, her voice tinged with both amusement and resignation. It seems we'll be spending this night much closer than either of us planned. In the bioluminescent light, Drake could see her expression, a mixture of challenge and something else he couldn't quite read. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. This assignment had just become far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Welcome to the Resolute Dawn, Your Highness, he muttered. I hope you enjoy impossible situations. Her answering laugh was like starlight-given voice. Oh, Nathan, I'm beginning to think I might enjoy them very much indeed. The darkness in Drake's quarters was never truly complete, not with Ariel's bioluminescent skin casting a soft, ethereal glow. He lay on his side at the edge of the narrow bed, hyper-aware of the princess's presence behind him. They'd arranged themselves back to back, a thin blanket serving as an improvised barrier between them. Your breathing is too measured, Ariel murmured into the darkness. You're clearly not asleep. Neither are you. How observant. He felt her shift slightly. Is this how all humans sleep? Balanced on the edge like they might flee at any moment? Drake adjusted his position, trying to maintain the precarious distance between them. Only when sharing quarters with royalty who could have them executed for impropriety. Her laugh vibrated through the mattress. Executed? Please, we're far more civilized than that. We'd simply have you disappeared. That's so much more comforting. I thought so. Another shift, and suddenly her silver hair brushed against his shoulder. Though I must admit, your quarters are warmer than I expected. Luminalis metabolism runs rather cold. Drake stiffened as he felt her move closer, presumably seeking warmth. Your Highness, we've already established you can use my name, Commander. Her voice held a touch of amusement, especially since we're quite literally in bed together. That's not helping the situation. What situation? Her innocence was clearly feigned. I'm merely making an observation about thermal dynamics. Drake rolled his eyes in the darkness, though the effect was somewhat lost given that she could probably sense his elevated heart rate. Get some rest, Ariel. Tomorrow's likely to be just as eventful. As you wish. She settled again, though she remained closer than before. Though I do wonder. Wonder what? If all human soldiers are this professionally rigid, or if it's a special talent of yours. Drake bit back a retort as her soft laughter filled the darkness. It was going to be a very long night. Morning arrived with the harsh buzz of Drake's alarm, only to find them in a compromising position. Somehow during the night, Ariel had turned toward him, her face pressed against his back, one arm draped over his waist. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to a soft, peaceful glow. Drake froze, unsure how to extract himself without waking her. Before he could decide, he felt her stir. Oh. Her voice was thick with sleep, then more sharply as awareness returned. Oh! She jerked away so quickly she nearly fell off the bed. Drake caught her arm reflexively, preventing her fall but bringing them face to face. This, she said, her skin pulsing with embarrassment, did not happen. What didn't happen? Drake asked, unable to suppress a slight smile. The cuddling or the near fall? Both. Neither. Her skin flickered rapidly. And I do not cuddle, Commander. Luminalis nobles do not engage in such primitive contact. Of course not. You were merely conducting a thermal experiment. She narrowed her eyes. You're mocking me. I wouldn't dare. Your heart rate suggests otherwise. She extracted herself from his grip with as much dignity as she could muster. I suppose you'll be insufferably pleased with yourself all day now. Drake swung his legs over the side of the bed, reaching for his uniform jacket. I'm just honored to have been part of your scientific research, Your Highness. A pillow hit the back of his head with surprising force. I thought violence was beneath your people, he said, turning to face her. Ariel sat cross-legged on the bed, her silver hair charmingly disheveled. We make exceptions for particularly irritating humans. Their banter was interrupted by a knock at the door. Drake's hand went to his weapon as he checked the security feed. Breakfast delivery, he reported. Standard security protocols. Thank goodness, Ariel said, smoothing her robes. I'm famished. Though I warn you, if you've arranged for some primitive human sustenance. Drake opened the door to reveal a hovering tray laden with traditional Luminalis breakfast foods, crystalline fruits and something that looked like iridescent bread. You researched Luminalis cuisine? She couldn't quite hide her surprise. Part of the job. He accepted the tray, checking it for tampering before setting it down. Though I hope you don't mind if I stick to my primitive coffee. How do you take it? She asked, selecting a piece of crystal fruit. Black. How appropriately austere. She watched him pour from his personal coffee maker. May I? Drake paused. You want to try coffee? Pure scientific curiosity. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Unless you're afraid of sharing your cup with a superior being? He handed her the mug, watching as she took a delicate sip. Her face scrunched up immediately, skin flashing with displeasure. That's horrible. She thrust the cup back at him. How do you drink that? An acquired taste. He took a long, deliberate sip, enjoying her look of disgust. Like many things. Her expression softened slightly. Yes, I suppose they are. They settled into a strange routine over the next few days. Drake would wake first, always finding Ariel had migrated closer during the night despite her protest. She'd pretend to be asleep until he pretended not to notice her extracting herself from whatever compromising position they'd ended up in. One evening, as Drake reviewed security footage on his datapad, Ariel paced their small quarters like a caged star, her light pulsing with restless energy. If you're bored, Drake said without looking up, you could help me analyze these feeds. I'm not bored, she continued pacing. I'm contemplating the diplomatic ramifications of being confined to a human's quarters. Uh-huh. He glanced up. Is that why you've been watching me remove my jacket for the past 5 minutes? Her skin flashed brilliant white before settling into a flustered pattern. I was doing no such thing. I was merely observing human behavioral patterns. Right. He stretched deliberately, hiding a smile as her light flickered again. And what have you observed? That humans are insufferably smug. She moved closer, peering at his datapad. What are you looking for anyway? Drake's expression turned serious. Patterns. The attack wasn't random. Someone had inside knowledge of ship operations, security rotations. You think there's a traitor aboard? She leaned over his shoulder, her hair brushing his cheek. I think there's more than one. He pulled up another feed. Look here. The power failure that trapped us in darkness, it shouldn't have been possible with the backup systems unless someone deliberately disabled them. Her voice dropped lower. You know what this means? Yeah. He turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close they were. We can't trust anyone on this ship except each other. Her skin rippled with unexpected patterns. You trust me, Commander. Against my better judgment. He held her gaze. Do you trust me? She studied him for a long moment. Also against my better judgment. Neither moved away. Drake found himself mesmerized by the play of light beneath her skin, the way it seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breathing. He could feel the coolness radiating from her body, smell that strange, intoxicating scent like starlight and ozone. Nathan, she said softly, using his first name for the first time since that first night. Your heart rate is elevated again. Scientific observation? Professional concern. But her own light was pulsing faster. We should focus on the security feeds. We should, he agreed, not moving. A warning beep from the datapad shattered the moment. Drake looked down to see another security anomaly flagged in the system. Someone's accessing restricted files in the ship's database, he said, professional focus returning. Looking for information about... About what? About you. He met her eyes again, all trace of flirtation gone. They're after your diplomatic codes. With those, they could... start a war. Her skin paled to a ghostly white. Nathan, if they access those codes, they won't. He stood every inch the soldier now. I promise. Her answering smile was both bitter and fond. Don't make promises you can't keep, Commander. I never do. Days bled into nights, with each passing hour drawing them closer, despite their mutual pretense of maintaining professional distance. Drake noticed how Ariel would find excuses to touch him. A brush of fingers when passing datapads, leaning against him while reviewing security footage, even accidentally bumping into him in their cramped quarters. One evening, as ship's night approached, Drake was removing his uniform jacket when he heard a sharp intake of breath behind him. Is there a problem, Your Highness? He asked, turning to find her staring. You're disrobing. Her skin flickered rapidly through various patterns. Drake paused, shirt half unbuttoned. I'm changing into sleep clothes, as I've done every night for the past week. Yes, but... She seemed flustered. Must you do it so... deliberately? Deliberately? He couldn't help but smirk. How exactly does one accidentally change clothes? You know what I mean. She turned away, but not before he caught the bright flush of her bioluminescence. On Luminalis, removing clothing in another's presence is considered intimate. Even uniform jackets? Especially formal attire. She risked a glance back at him. It's a sign of trust, vulnerability. Drake considered this, then slowly finished removing his jacket. Well, I do trust you. The admission hung in the air between them. Ariel turned back fully, her expression unreadable, but her skin creating complex patterns he'd never seen before. You shouldn't, she said softly. Trust me, I mean. I'm not what you think. And what do I think? He stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her voice. That I'm just some spoiled princess. That I'm here for simple diplomatic reasons. Her light dimmed. The truth is more complicated. I'm starting to realize everything about you is complicated. She laughed, but it held no humor. You have no idea. Then abruptly changing the subject, your shoulder is injured. Drake glanced at the old scar visible through his partially unbuttoned shirt. Training accident, years ago. Without warning, she reached out and traced the scar with cool fingers. Her touch sent electricity through his skin. Ariel. Shh. Her fingers continued their exploration. I'm conducting a tactical assessment of my protector's battle readiness. Is that what we're calling it? Her eyes met his, filled with challenge and something darker. Would you prefer I call it something else? Their charged moment was interrupted by a sudden power fluctuation. The lights flickered, and Ariel's skin flared bright enough to cast shadows. That's not normal, Drake said, instantly alert. No, she agreed, her hand still resting on his shoulder. My people's bioluminescence responds to emotional stress, but this... She looked down at her glowing skin in alarm. This is different. The ship's computer chimed with an incoming message. Drake moved to his terminal, keenly aware of Ariel following close behind. It's encrypted, he muttered, fingers flying over the controls, but not with UGF protocols. Let me. Ariel leaned over him, her hair falling around them like a silver curtain. I recognize this pattern. The message decoded into a series of images. Surveillance photos of Ariel at various diplomatic functions, complex technical diagrams, and finally what looked like assassination orders written in an alien script. These are internal Luminalis codes, she whispered, her skin pulsing erratically. Nathan, these are from my father's personal security force. Your father? Drake turned to face her. The Emperor ordered the hit on his own daughter? No, he... Her light began to strobe violently. He wouldn't... I can't... Drake had never seen her lose control like this. Her whole body was glowing so brightly it hurt to look at her directly. Without thinking, he reached for her face. cradling it between his hands. "Hey, look at me," he said softly. "Just breathe. Don't." But she didn't pull away. Luminalis facial touching is, "We only—" "I know." He brushed his thumb across her cheek, feeling the cool silk of her skin. "I did my research, remember?" Her eyes widened. "You know that this is—" Her voice trailed off as his other hand slid into her hair. "The most intimate gesture in your culture?" "Yeah," he smiled slightly. "Consider it a tactical decision." "Tactical?" Her light began to steady, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "You were about to go supernova. I had to do something." She laughed shakily. "So this is purely professional?" "Absolutely." He was close enough now to see the stellar patterns swirling in her eyes. "Just your dedicated protector, maintaining your safety through approved cultural interfaces." "Liar," she whispered and kissed him. Her lips were cool and tasted like stardust. Drake felt electricity course through every point where their skin connected, as if he were kissing lightning given form. Her light enveloped them both, turning the world white-hot and endless. When they finally broke apart, Aruiel's skin was creating patterns he'd never seen before. Complex, beautiful spirals that seemed to reach for him. "That," she said breathlessly, "was not in any cultural briefing?" "No." Drake rested his forehead against hers. "But I think we have bigger problems right now." She sobered immediately. "My father's security codes, if they're involved, then this goes deeper than we thought." He straightened, though he kept one hand entwined with hers. "We need to—" The ship's emergency sirens began to wail. "Warning," the computer announced. "Hull breach detected in sections 15 through 18. Emergency containment protocols engaged." Drake and Ariel shared a look of understanding. Whatever was happening, whatever conspiracy they'd stumbled into, they were now in it together. "Ready to face impossible situations?" he asked. Her answering smile was fierce and bright as a newborn star. "With you?" "Always." The hull breach alarms had barely finished wailing when Drake's security systems detected movement in the corridor. He shared a silent look with Aruiel, who was already moving into position, her advanced Luminalis pistol drawn. "3 signatures," Drake whispered, checking the sensors. "Heavy weapons." "Good." Aruiel's skin pulsed with battle-ready energy. "I was getting tired of being trapped in here anyway." The door's security panel sparked, the same method as before. But this time, they were ready. As the first attacker breached the entrance, Drake and Ariel moved in perfect synchronization. His conventional firearms complemented her energy weapons, creating a deadly crossfire that caught their attackers completely off guard. "Behind you!" Aruiel called out, her warning followed by a blast of plasma that seared past Drake's shoulder, taking down an assassin he hadn't even seen. "Nice shot," he grunted, dispatching the last intruder with practiced efficiency. "You sound surprised." She moved to his side, her light creating tactical shadows. "I told you I've been trained since birth." "Yeah, about that." Drake secured the door before turning to her. "Time to come clean. Who are you really, Aruiel?" Her skin dimmed slightly. "Would you believe I'm actually a military intelligence operative? Undercover as a princess?" "No." She smiled wryly. "I am the princess. I'm just a different kind of princess than most expect." Before Drake could respond, his datapad chimed with an encrypted message. His eyes widened as he read it. "Admiral Harrison is calling an emergency council meeting," he said. "All senior staff and your father's representatives." Ariel's expression hardened. "Perfect. That's where they'll make their move." "They?" "The Eternal Light faction." Her fingers tightened on her weapon. "Extremists who believe Luminalis should rule the galaxy alone. They've infiltrated my father's security forces and now—" "They're using your diplomatic codes to spark a war," Drake finished. "But why involve the Admiral?" "Because," she met his eyes, "he's their leader." "Harrison?" Drake's jaw tightened. "Of course, the assignment, the security breaches. He put us together hoping we'd kill each other." Ariel's light pulsed with anger. "A human soldier and a Luminalis princess. The perfect spark for interspecies conflict. Well, Drake allowed himself a grim smile. I'd say his plan backfired. Spectacularly. She moved closer, her cool fingers brushing his arm. Though I admit, at first I did consider shooting you. Only at first. You grew on me. Her skin flickered with playful patterns, like a particularly stubborn fungus. Your romantic comparisons need work. And your timing needs work, she countered. We're in the middle of exposing a conspiracy, and you're flirting? Says the woman who can't keep her hands off me. Ariel glanced down at where she was still touching him and quickly withdrew her hand, skin pulsing with embarrassment. I was merely checking you for injuries. Of course. He caught her hand before she could fully retreat. So, about this emergency council meeting, we'll need to spring our own trap. Her fingers interlaced with his. I have the proof of Harrison's communications with the extremists, but we'll need to get him to implicate himself publicly. Drake studied her face. You have a plan. I always have a plan. Her smile turned dangerous. How do you feel about playing bait? For you, I'm starting to get used to it. Her expression softened momentarily. Nathan ... Later, he said softly. First, let's save the galaxy. Then we can figure out whatever this is. Whatever this is. Her light created complex, intimate patterns. Commander Drake, are you suggesting there's something to figure out? Well, he pulled her closer. We have shared a bed for over a week now. Purely for tactical reasons, she murmured, not resisting. Purely tactical, he agreed, then kissed her. This time the kiss was different, less desperate than before, but somehow more dangerous. When they parted, Ariel's skin was glowing so brightly it cast rainbow refractions across the walls. That, she said breathlessly, was not part of the mission parameters. I'm known for improvising. Clearly. She straightened her robes, trying to regain her composure. Now, about that trap. The emergency council chamber was a testament to human luminalis cooperation, a blend of UGF utilitarian design and ethereal alien aesthetics. Drake entered first, playing the role of dutiful protector as Ariel glided in behind him, every inch the haughty princess. Admiral Harrison stood at the head of the council table, flanked by two luminalis security officers whose insignias marked them as members of the Emperor's personal guard. Princess Vera, Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. We were concerned for your safety during the breach. Commander Drake handled the situation admirably, Ariel said, her tone cold and formal. Though I find the timing of these attacks interesting. Oh, Harrison's eyebrow raised. How so? They seem to coincide perfectly with the transmission of certain sensitive diplomatic codes. Drake watched Harrison's hand twitch slightly toward his sidearm. The two luminalis guards tensed. Your Highness, Harrison's voice hardened, perhaps we should discuss this in private. I think not. Ariel's skin began to pulse with increasing brightness. In fact, I believe everything should be discussed quite publicly. Commander? Drake activated the room's holographic display, projecting the encrypted communications they discovered. These messages were sent using the Admiral's personal authentication codes, orders for assassination, weapons smuggling, and lies. Harrison drew his weapon, but Drake was faster. The Admiral found himself staring down the barrel of Drake's sidearm. Those guards behind you? Ariel's voice carried a hint of amusement. They're not actually my father's men. They're my men. The supposed luminalis guards drew their weapons, pointing them at Harrison. You see, Admiral, Ariel continued, moving to stand beside Drake, while you were plotting to start a war, I was running my own operation to expose the Eternal Light faction and their human collaborators. A primitive and an alien princess, Harrison spat. You really think anyone will believe? They'll believe the evidence, Drake cut in. And your confession, which you've just given in front of the entire UGF Security Council. He nodded toward the active communications panel. Live feed. Harrison's face went pale. Check, Ariel said sweetly, her hand brushing Drake's arm. I believe humans call it checkmate. I'm starting to think you've been playing us all from the beginning. Drake murmured as security forces entered to take Harrison into custody. Not all of you. Her skin created those intimate patterns he was beginning to recognize. Some things can't be faked, Commander. Like your snoring? I do not snore. Her light flared indignantly. I emit gentle harmonic resonances during rest cycles. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Princess. After Harrison and his conspirators were secured, Drake found himself alone with Aruiel in one of the ship's observation lounges. The vast expanse of space stretched before them, stars glittering like scattered diamonds. So, he said, watching her reflection in the transparent steel, military intelligence? Among other things. She turned to face him, her skin creating soft, intimate patterns in the dimmed light. My father believed the best way to protect our people was to have eyes everywhere, even in his own security forces. And now I return to Luminalis. She stepped closer. The question is, Commander Drake, what will you do? Drake raised an eyebrow. Is that an invitation? Perhaps. Her light pulsed playfully. Though I should warn you, the position of royal protector is quite demanding. Constant proximity to the princess, shared living quarters. Sounds terrible. He closed the distance between them. Almost as bad as being trapped in a tiny room together during an assassination attempt. Much worse, she agreed, her cool fingers finding his. There would be state functions, diplomatic meetings. More assassination attempts? Probably. Her smile turned mischievous. Though I suppose having a trained human warrior at my side might be tactically advantageous. Just tactically? Well, she drew him closer, her skin creating patterns he'd never seen before. I have grown somewhat accustomed to your presence. It would be inefficient to train a new protector. Inefficient, he echoed, amused. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it? Instead of answering, he kissed her. Her light flared bright enough to illuminate the entire lounge, casting prismatic patterns across the stars. When they finally parted, Ariel's expression was both soft and challenging. I should warn you, accepting this position would cause quite the scandal. A human and a Luminalis princess. I thought you liked impossible situations. I'm starting to love them. She rested her forehead against his. Is that a yes, Commander? On one condition. His lips quirked. We get a bigger bed. Her answering laugh was like starlight given voice, her light creating patterns that spoke of joy and promise and possibilities neither of them had imagined when this mission began. I think that can be arranged, she whispered, and kissed him again as the resolute dawn carried them toward their next impossible situation, together. Dear listeners, thank you for joining Nathan Drake and Princess Aruiel on their journey from reluctant roommates to something far more extraordinary. Their story, while set among the stars, touches on something deeply human, the way unexpected circumstances can lead to the most meaningful connections. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this tale of interstellar romance and intrigue. What moment made you smile? Which scene had you on the edge of your seat? Did you have a favorite line of dialogue between our mismatched pair? Perhaps you have theories about what challenges await them on Luminalis. Every story lives through its listeners' ears, and yours are particularly valuable. Your comments and reactions help shape future tales and bring new perspectives to the ones already told. Whether you love the political intrigue, the action sequences, or just enjoyed hearing about two people from different worlds finding common ground, I want to hear about it. And if you're wondering about what happens next for Drake and Aruiel, well, the stars hold many more adventures. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we imagine together. So please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going among the stars. P.S. And yes, we all know Ariel definitely snores, no matter what she claims about harmonic resonances.